The risen King, Jesus, the rock, our salvation, all that we are and ever will be, we find and have in Him. And what a week this has been, hasn't it? Thursday, I think 75 degrees. Saturday, 35 degrees. 40-degree differential taking place in a 2-day period. Welcome to Champaign, Illinois. I was out cutting my grass yesterday because I've been gone for so long and need to be cut. And there were snow flurries falling around. And I said, what is up with this? But the sun's out today, and we're here, and you're here, and man, we're to just worship and give thanks to God, our church family, our community, our people. We come to the final message in our series, Finding Jesus. And we've talked about how fishermen found Jesus, and how a royal official found Jesus, and how a soldier found Jesus. And today we're talking about how in his last dying moments, an outcast, a convicted criminal, a thief, finds Jesus. Years ago, I was the pastor of the Wiley'sburg Baptist Church in Wiley'sburg, Virginia. There wasn't a stoplight in the entire county. We were so far out in Virginia, Southside Virginia, but it was awesome, the people I got to meet and the families I got to be a part of for the years that we were there. But I was a young minister, and the church just started out as I was going through Southeastern Seminary there outside of Raleigh, North Carolina. And a family came to me, asked if I would do a funeral service for one of their family members, a husband, a father, who had passed away. And they came to me, and I didn't know why they came to me, but then I found out years before he had been a member of the church there. And I didn't know them, didn't know the family. Said, all right, I'll help as much as I can. And so I met with the family to hear the stories about this gentleman. And they told a lot of different stories, but there wasn't a lot of stories about faith, things I try to key in on, listen for, key words about how he lived his life. And faith didn't seem to be a big part of it. So, I'm brand new, I'm young, I'm getting my feet on the ground there. And so I tried to put together a message that would be encouraging for the family. Well, the day of his funeral came. And the church is packed. He was well known in the community. And the songs were played. They were sung. The music, prayers were given. One of the family members stood and gave a eulogy. And then it was my time to come to the podium and give the message. And as I prepared to get up, his sons, in fact, the oldest son, got up from his pew and said, Pastor, could I say a word? Well, what am I to do? Yeah, I said, absolutely. Come on up and share. And he came up to the podium. He stood there, this young man. He said, I have some good news. He said, I was with my father the day he passed. And I was there at his bedside. And as we were sharing and talking together, I began to share with him the good news of Jesus. And I told him how Jesus died for his sins and how Jesus gave his life for him, and he loved him so dearly. And he said, Dad, you come to the end of life, and this will be a time for you to make a decision if you're going to make a decision for Jesus. And his dad said yes. And he prayed the sinner's prayer with his son. And his son said, and the good news is, today he is in heaven with Jesus. And amens went up all around the sanctuary. Now, a little transparency here, all right? Little transparency, because at that time, I was a little bit skeptical. I've always heard these stories from ministers in my past growing up about deathbed conversions. The last-minute conversions where a person has lived their whole life without Jesus, and then at the very last moments of life, they began to decide to follow Jesus. All the years they've had to acknowledge Jesus, but all the years they've ignored Jesus, but then at the very end, they make a decision to begin to love Jesus. And I have to admit, I was a little bit skeptical. Did he really, in this last moment, become a believer and a Jesus follower and give his life to Jesus? And maybe even more beyond that, did he really deserve to find Jesus? You know, we saw how fishermen found Jesus. And we can say, hey, fishermen, well, they lived like sailors, and they probably talked like sailors. But they provided for the family. They were active in their community. They made a difference with where they are. So we could say, hey, in our minds, yeah, all right, we could see that these fishermen would deserve to find Jesus. And we saw a royal official who was kept the money for the treasury of the Candace, queen of the Ethiopians. Now, he was not a Jew. He did not follow the only real true God of the Jews, but yet he was a good man. He was honest. He honored his queen and his people, and he lived, it seems like, a decent life. So, you know, he deserved to follow Jesus. And then we saw how a soldier, Cornelius, a centurion in the Roman army, and the Jews hated the Romans. The Romans ruled over the Jews at the time. The Jews hated the Romans. But Cornelius, he was devout. He prayed to God often, and he gave his money to the poor. And, you know, we can see how he too deserved to find Jesus. But what about a thief who wasted his entire life stealing from others? I think most of us will nod our heads and agree that good, respectable people deserve to find Jesus. But what's so amazing that Jesus is just as happy when people we do not feel deserve to find Jesus. He is just as happy when they too find Jesus. In fact, sometimes it is those people who we don't feel deserve to find Jesus, who find Jesus when everyone else is blind to him. And that's exactly what we find in our passage today. The year's around 33 A.D. Jesus' time on earth has come to an end. His people have betrayed him. His disciples have deserted him. The religious leaders are crucifying him. And in the midst of all this mayhem, a single lonely thief finds him. Luke chapter 23, verse 32. Luke chapter 23, verse 32. It says, 2 other men, both criminals, were also led out with him, Jesus, to be executed. And when they came to the place called the Skull, there they crucified him along with the criminals, one on his right, the other on his left. And Jesus said, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. And they divided up his clothes by casting lots. The people stood watching, and the rulers even sneered at him. They said, he saved others, let him save himself, if he is the Christ of God, the chosen one. And the soldiers also came up and mocked him. They offered him wine vinegar and said, if you are the king of the Jews, save yourself. And there was a written notice above him which read, this is the King of the Jews. And one of the criminals who hung there hurled insults at him. Aren't you the Christ? Save yourself and others. We see the main players here in this story. We have the people, the religious rulers, the soldiers, the criminals, and Jesus. The people stood there, the crowd stood there watching this entire thing go down, trying to wrap their minds around what was happening. Here was Jesus, the one who walked among them. They had seen him heal the blind, help the lame to walk, the deaf to hear. They looked in his eyes and saw the eyes of God. And they sensed that he loved them greatly. In fact, he said he had come to bring them life and life in abundance. And here he was on the cross losing his. He was to be the promised Messiah, but on this day it doesn't look like he's going to be able to deliver on that promise. And all the religious rulers, they were sneering. Now, hear that word sneering. I don't think religious leaders should be sneering God. I don't think God sneers. And they represent God. You know, I think God is about love and grace and mercy and kindness and helping others and being there for them. And they're to show the love of God, give the mercy of God, and spread the grace of God, just like God, just like Jesus. And because they were to have Jesus' heart, their heart should be breaking for Jesus. And instead, they're there sneering and saying, he saved others. Let him save himself if he is the Christ of God, the chosen one. And all the soldiers, they were mocking Jesus. They offered him wine vinegar and saying, if you are the King of the Jews, save yourself. And even one of the criminals hurling insults. Aren't you the Christ? Save yourself and us. Can you feel the scorn, the disappointing doubt, the sheer disdain of their words? If he is the Christ of God, the chosen one, let him save himself. If you are the King of the Jews, save yourself. Aren't you the Christ? If you are the Christ, save yourself and us. They were wanting Jesus to prove that he was the Christ. But what they could not see is that at that very moment, that is actually what he was doing. You see, they were making an assumption. They were assuming that if Jesus were the Christ, he would have the power and the ability to save himself from the cross, from dying. But what they could not see, because their minds were too small, their thinking was too limited, they never dreamed that the Christ, the chosen one, the King of the Jews, would possess enough power to save an entire world for all eternity. For the book of John it says, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish. For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but that the entire world, all humanity, would be saved through him. But they did not get it. They could not see it. They were blinded to Jesus. But right in the middle of their blindness, one single lonely criminal thief finds Jesus. Verse 40. But the other criminal rebuked him. Don't you fear God, he said, since you are under the same sentence. But the other criminal rebuked him. And in rebuking him, he was rebuking everyone else there as well with his words. You know, he goes against the flow, pushes back against popular opinion, and dares to believe in a dying king. You know, it's easy to go along with the crowd. Man, it's so simple to get caught up in the moment and go in the direction everyone else is going. Because we all like to be accepted. We all like to fit in. We all like to be a part and others to feel good about us. And so we go along with them. It's easy to go along with the crowd. Societal pressures and societal without and within call us to conform, to give in. It takes courage to say no when everyone else is saying yes, or to say yes when everyone else is saying no. To say king when everyone else is screaming, crucify, crucify. And he lays it out and says, we are punished justly, for we are getting what our deeds deserve, but this man has done nothing wrong. You know, isn't that amazing? Even this dying criminal has a sense of justice. You know, I think we all like to believe that there is a kind of justice in the world, that everyone sort of gets what they deserve. And this criminal believed that. He totally believed that. He even admitted that he and his other criminal friend were getting what they deserved. They had committed crimes, and they are being punished for the crimes justly that they had committed. He didn't argue about it, didn't try to deny it, didn't say, hey, I'm innocent. He just owned it and accepted it. But you know, as I look at him, this figure, I can't believe it was always like that for him. I've got to believe that at one time there was a little boy who came into the world with all the hope and all the potential of every child that is ever born into the world. His future lay before him. He could have done so much good, this little child. But instead of helping people, he hurt them. Instead of sacrificing himself for them and serving them, he stole from them. And now years later, his crimes have caught up with him. And he is being justly punished. You know, that's justice, getting what his deeds deserve. And that's our justice too, getting what our deeds deserve. But this man has done nothing wrong. Because Jesus has done nothing wrong, he is getting exactly what he does not deserve. You know, how incredibly insightful this criminal in his pain and his anguish, realizing it's coming to an end. How insightful to realize that Jesus is getting what he does not deserve. Jesus, the sinless Son of God who did nothing wrong, had to suffer and die. What he did not deserve, to make it possible for us to get what we don't deserve, God's grace. And then he said, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. The criminal's eyes were open and he saw Jesus for who he was. That Jesus was not just the king of the Jews, he was king of all creation. And as his heart opens to what his eyes have just seen and realized, he makes a simple request to remember me. Remember me, King Jesus, when you come into your kingdom. And Jesus answered him, I tell you the truth, today you will be with me in paradise. There's no greater truth. A truth greater than all truth. Jesus says, because you have seen me and found me, because your heart is open to me, today you will be with me in paradise. Today. And he's telling him, today your life on earth is going to end. Today you're going to breathe your last breath. Today you're going to feel your last emotion. Today you're going to feel and experience your final pain. And immediately know the joy of heaven with me today. Verse 44. And it was now about the 6th hour. And darkness came over the whole land until the 9th hour, for the sun stopped shining. and the curtain of the temple was torn in two. And Jesus called out with a loud voice, "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit." And when he had said this, he breathed his last. That day, a criminal found Jesus and experienced heaven. And he did not deserve it. But neither do we. But Jesus came to give us what none of us deserve. His mercy, his love, his grace. And maybe today, for the first time, you are beginning to find Jesus. Just like this criminal, you're beginning to see Jesus. Realize that he got what he did not deserve so we could have what we don't deserve. He gave his life so that we could have life. And you open your heart to Jesus and your life to Jesus by saying, "Jesus, I give you my life. Jesus, I see you. I found you. I give you my life." And step across the line of faith and begin to live a life with Jesus. But maybe you're a believer, but there's someone in your life that you do not believe deserves to find Jesus. Maybe is it a family member that has hurt you? Maybe is it a friend that has walked out on you and turned his back on you? Maybe a coworker has taken advantage of you. And you don't think they deserve to find Jesus. But that doesn't matter, because Jesus does. And your prayer would be, "Jesus, help me help them find you. Jesus, help me help them find you." Finding Jesus. That's what we are all about. Dear God, thank you. Man, thank you for this time that we've had here today. Man, the reality is none of us deserve to find you, but you came to make it possible for us to find you. While we were yet sinners, lost, alone, while we were yet sinners, you died for us. And make it possible to be found. So, dear God, use what we have heard today. Help us to find Jesus, to find you just as we have found you. And even help us to find you more and learn more about you and grow in our faith and our walk in our life. So that we could bring other people and help them find Jesus too. These things we pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you for worshiping with us today and spending your morning with us. I hope you have an awesome week. Remember, next Sunday, greeting the church after the worship service. Enjoy the afternoon, and God bless.